Welcome to this I-900 meeting. We're going to start with the evaluation
Recording
of
in
Washington State
progress.
oversight of the cannabis industry. We have Emily and Jolene from the State Auditor's Office. Go ahead, you can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Emily Simber, the lead on this audit, and I'm here today with my colleague, Jolene Stanislawski. Today, we're presenting the results of our performance audit, evaluating Washington State oversight of the cannabis industry, follow-up issues. Before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Liquor and Cannabis Board for all of their time and cooperation during this audit. I'll give you a high-level overview of our key results, which we'll discuss throughout this presentation. The first result concerns the Liquor and Cannabis Board's efforts to implement a cannabis tracking system that can help it monitor the industry and enforce its regulations. We found that historical project management problems compounded by leadership turnover has left the agency with less effective data tools to manage risk. Secondly, while LCB has made improvements to its enforcement processes, we found the agency is still limited in its ability to efficiently address risks, such as product diversion to illegal markets. After cannabis was legalized in 2012, state law tasked LCB with regulating the consumer marketplace. These regulations were designed to prevent product diversion for illegal distribution, to collect taxes, and ensure product is safe for the public. The industry has grown tremendously since then. Being able to trace products through each phase of that production process makes it easier for LCB to evaluate and address high-risk areas. These include conducting necessary product recalls and identifying indicators of diversion. But to do so effectively requires the agency to have accurate and timely data. In our 2018 performance audit, we identified ways that LCB could leverage its existing data and software tools to perform automated analyses that could highlight actual transactions or licensee data presenting the greatest risk of illegal activity. During that audit, LCB was working on procuring and implementing a new data system, which agency leadership at the time said would be able to help do everything the audit recommended. However, several years later, our office learned that LCB could not fully implement the audit's recommendations. We conducted this follow-up audit to learn why our recommendations weren't put into action and what LCB has been doing in the meantime to help address risks. This audit sought to answer these two questions. What, if any, barriers have the Liquor and Cannabis Board faced in implementing effective risk management methods to reduce risks identified during our previous audit? And what methods has the agency used to ensure it effectively prioritizes its enforcement activities? Before we jump into results, I would like to note that between our two audits, the agency has seen a near complete turnover in leadership roles, and its current executives have inherited many of the ongoing issues that we'll discuss in this presentation. I'll pass this over now to my colleague, Jolene Stanislawski, who will discuss some of the barriers the agency has faced in implementing our previous recommendations, along with the new cannabis tracking system.
Thank you, Emily. Hi, I'm Jolene Stanislawski. I'm a performance auditor on the team. As our previous audit drew to a close, we were told that the new system LCB had procured, known as LEAF, would have the functionality to deliver on many of the audit's recommendations. In particular, we recommended the agency devise methods for leveraging their data system through automated alerts to better manage risk and help enforcement efforts. However, during this current audit, we found that the agency encountered barriers to implementing them, which I'll be detailing in this presentation. They included difficulties in both project and vendor management, limitations with the current cannabis data system, and resource constraints due to another ongoing IT project. In 2018, LCB was faced with a vendor that refused to extend its contract for the agency's previous data system, and so staff worked to quickly find a replacement, which unfortunately was not successful. This new replacement, LEAF, suffered a number of project management and implementation issues. A lessons learned report from the OCIO in 2020 outlined why LCB could not implement a more efficient data tool. From that report, and by corroborating with staff who were previously part of the project, we learned that the launch of LEAF failed due to expedited procurement, insufficient expertise, lack of scope buy-in from users and subject matter experts, a focus on deadlines over deliverables, and accountability and contract management issues. Since LEAF failed and the agency chose to abandon that system, LCB deployed a stopgap system known as CCRS to at least gather licensee data. Although meant to be temporary, this system is LCB's only data system to track cannabis. The agency has made some changes to that system since its inception, but it still has limitations, resulting in enforcement staff not having as reliable data as they could and making it more cumbersome to conduct recalls. These limitations in the data include out-of-date data during inspections, which is due to lags in data reporting since licensees only have to report weekly, which means that data and inventory could be considerably different, potentially wasting both LCB staff and licensee time and causing unnecessary hardships to the licensees. Licensees cannot view or easily correct their data after they upload it. Well, CCRS sends an automated email to let licensees know whether or not their data uploaded or if there is an error. Licensees cannot view the data in CCRS themselves to confirm correct data submission or identify a specific error. The Government Accountability Office recommends that government systems facilitate timely resubmission of corrected data, including real-time online edits and validations. Cannabis cannot currently be tracked through the system from seedling to the product on the shelf because CCRS does not support a single identifier field. Without this single identifier that maintains the same number for each plant, the product produced, and then all the way to the final package on the retail shelf, it means that as cannabis moves through the system, there are new and different numbers applied at each step. And this can make it very difficult and time-consuming to recall any contaminated product. And finally, CCRS has limited data input safeguards to prevent erroneous data entry. Federal guidance recommends government systems have controls to help ensure that input data are validated to provide a reasonable assurance that erroneous data are prevented or detected prior to processing. And this is particularly important since LCB relies on the licensees to report complete and accurate information. For example, mistakes in licensee data resulted in an overstatement of sales by billions of dollars, most notably in 2022, when the system reported sales of almost $8 billion. The Department of Revenue estimated sales for the same time period at around $1.3 billion, and this was the result of a misplaced decimal. Further, during our analysis, we identified additional possible problems. For example, we found numerous records reflecting dates from before cannabis was legalized, including almost 60,000 products with reported dates ranging from 1899 to 2003. We also identified about 600,000 reported dates that were in the future, including for harvests and plant destructions. The current gaps in the system expose the agency to more risks that transactions worth scrutiny go undetected. And while the agency has been working to add more functionality to CCRS, a replacement will not be fully operational until 2031. And that's because the agency-wide systems modernization project to replace core legacy IT systems has taken priority over the replacement of CCRS. The agency is on its third iteration of this modernization project to replace aging core systems, and earlier attempts suffered from similar difficulties as the LEAF project. This included poorly defined scope, not communicating requirements to the project members, and having an incomplete vendor management plan. LCB has taken steps to improve project management concerns on this system modernization project. And continuing to address other project management issues will help ensure future project success. For example, LCB still lacks agency-wide project management guidance and has not yet defined requirements of what's needed in a new tracking system. As we asked agency leaders and employees about what happened since the last audit, it became clear that the people who made the decisions affecting the cannabis program are no longer with the agency. Leading practices say that consistent leadership helps ensure agency goals and project plans are executed as intended with minimal disruptions or changes in vision. Between July 2018 In July 2023, LCB saw turnover in a half dozen executive positions, including people in roles responsible for the LEAF project. Nearly all LCB leadership is new within the last 3 years, long after decisions had been made about prioritizing plans to update the agency's legacy IT systems. New leaders also indicated that they had not been made aware of the existence of the previous performance audit or of the OCIO lessons learned report from LEAF's project failures, which would have been helpful information to consider during current project planning to help prevent the similar issues in projects moving forward. And now I'm going to pass this back to Emily, who will discuss our results from the second objective. Thank you.
Thanks, Jolene. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, we started this audit because we did learn that LCB had not implemented our previous audit recommendations. Jolene walked you through the barriers that kept LCB from implementing them. I'll now describe what the agency has done to address risk in the absence of a quality data system. We learned that it has made some improvements to their enforcement processes, but is still limited in their ability to address risks as efficiently as it could. LCB has taken some recent steps that are helping it to be more proactive in its approach. For example, since the last audit, LCB made changes to help ensure it prioritizes and addresses complaints that pose the greatest risk to public health and safety, while those that are more regulatory in nature can be managed by compliance consultants. LCB also began using compliance consultants to regularly conduct proactive premises checks at licensed businesses. LCB uses such site visits to confirm that businesses are following requirements, to provide educational opportunities, and to identify possible signs of diversion. LCB has made other organizational changes to improve proactive enforcement efforts, such as emphasizing prevention and education with licensees and moving data specialists, known as examiners, to the Enforcement and Education Division. As a result, managers said they're now able to use the examiners more effectively by garnering more useful reports and better understanding the data. In the years since the previous audit, LCB struggled to implement the 2018 recommendations that it established a more automated approach to identifying risk. During the course of this current audit, we learned the agency began developing automated alerts, some of which are now in place. These include when certain licensees don't report any activity or for failed lab tests. While the alerts will help LCB focus its enforcement work, the new alerts don't address most of the risks our earlier audit identified. For example, they notify LCB staff if a business does not report sales, but do not alert them to sales at prices that are too low. The 2018 audit also recommended LCB analyze reported data to determine the thresholds that could indicate potential diversion. However, LCB managers said that thresholds used in the new alerts were arbitrarily chosen, and policies and procedures have not yet been developed around those alerts. And then further, as we described previously, the alerts do rely on data that's not consistently accurate. Additionally, the agency's efforts have been constrained by high staff turnover and reduced staffing in enforcement officer positions in the last several years. In 2022 and 23, average annual turnover for cannabis enforcement officers was about 50%, with a third of enforcement officer positions vacant in November 2023. This resulted in LCB not achieving some of their internal performance goals. For example, one of their goals included closing 90% of complaints in 60 days, but in 2023, the agency only closed 59% within 60 days. The agency was able to fill all but 4 positions by April 2024, showing some progress in this area. In response to the audit results we've outlined in this presentation, we make several recommendations detailed in the report. The recommendations fell into 4 categories: ways to improve on CCRS for the time being until a new system can be procured, project management improvements and formalization of project management guidance, including making this guidance accessible agency-wide, developing more formal guidance for prioritizing risk, and consulting our 2018 audit recommendations when developing any future system alerts. Our recommendations are detailed in full on page 28 of our report. I do want to make mention that while LCB has not been able to deploy a more robust cannabis tracking system for the past 12 years, the recreational cannabis market has changed and continues to change. So this report really is a framework that leaders such as yourselves can use to engage with LCB to establish clear goals for ensuring accountability in the recreational cannabis system. That concludes our presentation. Thank you. We're happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for state auditor before we call up LCB staff? Senator Short.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just based on what you just commented on, I'm wondering if you said the recreational market was different. So is it working with the recreational market where it's more challenging with the commercial market?
I would say it's the same for both.
Okay.
Oh, Representative Paulette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the target date for new software system is 2031. Would there be, well, what's the obstacle to implementing something much more sooner than that? And is funding the obstacle, and do licensees pay for the system?
Sure, I can let LCB speak more to that. In conversations with them, it does sound like staffing is a huge constraint around that. And I also believe that they're wanting these system modernization some of these phases to be implemented first before being able to do anything further with a tracking system, but I can let them speak to that in greater detail.
Thank you.
I think that's your, I see you nodding, Mark Webster. You guys can come on up, the LCB crew. And then I know we do have two people signed in, Gregory Foster and Jim McCrae. We will get to you right after their comments.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mullen. My name is David Postman, and I've been the chair of the LCB since March of 2021. Because I wasn't at the LCB back in the early days of cannabis regulation and legalization, I appreciated the auditor's engagement with our staff and the ideas for improvements they made both in the original 2018 audit, as well as what we see in the report that we're talking about here today. But as we worked with the auditor's office on this one, it became clear to me that they were conflating shortcomings with one tool we use with a failure to regulate cannabis. When we saw their draft audit report, that really was confirmed for me. And what we said in response was, and this is a quote, "Our concern is that readers of this audit report may incorrectly infer that the agency has not prioritized the traceability or regulatory functions that are enacted in law. This could not be further from the truth," close quote. Some, in fact, read the audit to mean exactly that. There was a headline that said, "State falls short in promise to regulate cannabis." That's very, very far from the truth. Again, I wish CCRS, this system, was more robust. I think there's things that I know that I would like to be able to do. But its shortcomings have not meant a lack of enforcement. Looking very specifically at violations of traceability, which is what this system does, and it at one point was seed to sale was the phrase that was used. And it is an important tool to look for both inversion and diversion. Cannabis that's coming into the regulated system from the unregulated world, or from the regulated producers out to the unregulated world. Both are bad signs. Both are things that we told the federal government in 2013 we would police. So we have continued to do that. Since the 2018 audit, we've issued more than 150 administrative violation notices for traceability non-compliance. And those vary in terms of severity and importance, but clearly we have tools that are working, and we're able to enforce the regulations and move towards compliance. I also think that what's been lost here is that our approach to enforcement changed after 2019 in response to Senate Bill 5318, which strongly emphasized that our cannabis regulatory work should be focused on compliance and education rather than enforcement. The mandate was that we should focus on public safety violations, not the less minor things, not the little stuff, and to reduce our penalties. It was a major shift for the agency. And I think our enforcement division has made that transition in an admirable way. In 2019, 82% of our violation notices were related to public safety violations. So in 2019, 82% were the meaty stuff, the things this legislature asked us to do. In 2023, that was up to 90%. I don't know where we are this year, but that to me, as the chair, is really good news. And we really need to acknowledge the great work of our team, and the effort has worked in cannabis so well that our director, Will Lucella, is now extending some of that into our alcohol regulatory work as well, where we start with compliance and education and warnings and don't just go to violations. At a recent meeting of our executive management team, Enforcement Education Manager Matt McCollum gave an in-depth briefing on the work his team has been doing along with our CFO's team and finance audit team that's turned up a variety of suspicious activity that then was turned into investigations with notice to correct and other things. It was just an example, and I would encourage anybody to go back and listen to it. It was just a great example of the really detailed, innovative, and even-handed, public safety focused investigative work that we do with the tools that we have. And also, I'm glad the auditors mentioned that we have made changes to CCRS, and that continues all the time. One of the things I did learn through this most recent audit and talking with our staff is the work of the examiners and enforcement education and the IT team to keep a running list of things that they can do to improve the usability for our team. And when we look at it, many different parts of our agency want access to this information, and everyone needs a slightly different piece of it. The problem that we faced was the 2018 audit was on a system that just doesn't exist today, as the auditor pointed out. So it's not that we chose not to implement the recommendations of 2018. It was that the situation changed so quickly after that, that those recommendations were on something that we didn't have in front of us anymore. So we moved to a new system, which you heard that sad tale too. I think the piece that's missing in that and the long list of things that the auditor says was to blame for that was performance as well of the vendor. I don't think we can excuse that completely. And I think that you'll see that from the lessons learned and other things, we have made major changes in our management of projects, both IT and others, under Will Lucella's direction.
David, could you speak to Representative Paulette's question? The 2031 timeline, is that?
Yeah.
What's the main constraint? Is it like, walk us through that.
Yeah. Money, people, and the systems modernization project. So we have now this major agency-wide project of system modernization. We've gone through the first major release. The second major release will be in the spring. And we do need to phase in any other thing we're working on so that it is then accessible to everybody in the agency and able to work across these platforms. I was asking team just this morning about that date because it does jump out at one. And I think the only thing that gives me a little comfort around it is we're not blind until then. It's not true that we have no tools to use. We have this, we are working to make it better. I think some of the recommendations of the auditor that we're already doing, we also have really serious engagement with the industry. There are people who are not shy about giving us a week by week critique of how it's gone. And I think some of those folks would say, if they were here, that they have seen vast improvement in CCRS and its usability. So 2031 seems like a long ways away. I won't be there when it comes around, but we're working toward it. SMP is going to make a big difference on all of our IT projects. And in the meantime, we continue to improve this. And I think there's clearly a renewed effort because of the interest from the auditor, as well as the fact that we have to start working on that new thing. 2031 doesn't mean we're going to do an RFP in 2030. We're getting out there. We've already done one RFI. We're going to do another one soon. We're going to do serious stakeholder work. We've done this before too, and you may hear that from one of the other people testifying today. There were work groups and things, but the world changes too, right? I think the legislature has been very clear about giving us a change in emphasis on enforcement. The industry has changed a lot, and so we're trying to be nimble to that. And so 2031, I hope we can do it sooner. That would be, the sort of worst case on our scheduling. but it is about trying to phase it with SMP. Even if you were to give us all the money in the world today, we wouldn't be able to do it right away, or we shouldn't do it right away. I think the OCIO would agree with that it needs to be phased in with SMP, and that functionality then is maximized, I think, agency-wide.
And Representative Paulette, if I could, I would just add that, we put SMP first in large part because the legislature asked us to. This is something that they funded and saw the value in. And I think for these big IT projects, there is really some value in getting the order right. You need that in place such that the traceability system can work with it, can work with Secure Access Washington, which, as the auditor points out, one of the previous traceability systems couldn't. That was a failing in one of the earlier ones. We need to get the system, or we need to get the platform in place so that we know we can have the kind of communication to and from that will help make both systems a lot better.
Excellent.
And then I'll just, I do think, again, the audit helped me as a newer employee there get a deep understanding of the history of this project. The auditors were great to work with. They were professional, of course, and I think our staff did a great job working with them. I do feel disappointed that the auditor, I don't feel recognized the breadth of what enforcement really means and the efforts that we do, and how much we have done since 2018 to actually enforce cannabis in one of the, I think, the better systems working in the country. And we were left with this really false impression that we've abandoned one of our key responsibilities. And I just want to assure the legislature that is not the case. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Board Chair and to Chair Mullet and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Mark Webster, Ledge Director at the LCB. Just a couple of very quick points that I think you've already heard. I just want to reiterate that we do worry that the report could conflate traceability and regulation. I think, as the Board Chair mentioned, much of this was magnified in press coverage of the report, but I think that's why we're so eager to kind of call it out here. We have a comprehensive system of regulation and enforcement, and we need and are working on a better traceability platform, but that overarching system does remain robust while we do so. It's not only CCRS, it's the examiners, the chemists, the education team, the enforcement officers, finance auditors outside of the E&E division that regulates that market very well. And that's including using CCRS to highlight potential discrepancies and spur investigations. And again, just on the SMP project, that is a big reason why that timeline has been pushed out. And it makes it seem like we haven't prioritized that. But again, we got directives and funding from the legislature to do that. And I think that's because the legislature saw the value in replacing some very, very outdated systems that go into licensing in really every corner of the enterprise. So we're excited about the work that we can do. And we're very thankful for some of the recommendations that we got from the auditor, some of which we're working on now, as my colleague Rachel Swanner will detail.
Hi, so for the record, I'm Rachel Swanner. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Liquor and Cannabis Board and the Audit Liaison. I'm going to touch just briefly on the areas of project management, and then I'll talk about a little bit about the CCRS enhancements, so more the technical side of everything. As you guys know, we're a small agency, and the auditors asked for a, talking about central repositories and a project management office, all of which we're already working on as we come in with new leadership. And this leadership has changed. We've recognized that already before the audit even started. The one thing that is a little concerning is the audit describes a failure in project management, and it really wasn't totally the case. Is there some places where we could have done better in our project management? Sure, and I think we all have lessons learned like that. The biggest issue was we had a major vendor issue, and we were kind of at the mercy of that vendor because we lost BioTrack. That was the one where the contract was ending, and we were working with this new vendor with Leaf, and they weren't implementing what we were telling them. We were giving them requirements. They weren't building them correctly. And then once we implemented, they actually were making changes behind the scenes that we didn't even approve as the contract owners. And so we found that the system, with all of that in place, we had to do something. And I think the agency did the best they could to keep the regulation going through this system by implementing CCRS. And I think, David, you said it best. We know that it's not the best system in the whole world. However, we have been implementing a lot of enhancements to the system and working on those alerts that the auditors described. We have a list of at least 20 that we are working on right now with go lives that are pushed out because we have to do it in phases, just as you would assume any IT project would. And so I think that as the agency moves on, we can actually implement those enhancements and move forward so that we can get to that new target traceability system. What I really love is that we've hired a senior project manager to oversee the new traceability project. And this individual is actually in all of these meetings. So as we talk about enhancements, if we can't do it, or if it's something that's really important to regulation, either through enforcement or through audit, they're sitting at the table and they're ready to put it into the requirements. We did do an RFI. We're going to do an updated RFI to see what's out there. What can we build? So great work coming in that area. And we do recognize what the auditor recommended, but I really wanted to put that out for you. The other piece is just talking about those enhancements. And I want to just address the graph that Jolene put up there about the misreported sales. We only report actual sales reported by licensees. That CCRS data and that 7.1 million that she said, that was found by our group. And so our data validation, our analysts, which are called compliance consultants and examiners, they caught that within their data analytics. So we have that functionality to be able to catch it. Yes, is it human? Of course it is. However, we did not report that. That did not go in an annual report. It didn't go up to OFM. Those numbers are actually caught by my team in the finance division when people report and pay their taxes. And so we ensure that if something looks way off, you have a licensee that's reported triple what they did before, we're going to go ahead and check it. So I think there's checks and balances in place that they may not be as modern as some of the newer ERP systems around that are catching some of these within the system instead of using a manual analytics. And lastly, I really want to thank the auditor's office. They did work with us. I think that they did a lot of good field work, and it's really going to help us get forward to a new system that's going to allow us some real technology to better regulate and better audit. I mean, just being selfish because I'm the CFO, right? To better audit the system. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions about the finance side, please let me know.
All right, thank you very much. Are there other questions for LCB before we call up Gregory and Jim? Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on up. You can both come up at the same time if you want. Oh, the other one's online. Got it.
Want to go with him first?
Yeah, go ahead. And let's try to do it in like roughly a couple minutes sort of thing, if you can. Okay, go ahead.
Sure. So good afternoon, Chair Mullet, members of the committee who I assume are online. My name is Gregory Foster and I'm with Cannabis Observer. My organization has observed and reported on cannabis policymaking in Washington State since 2018. We go to every public meeting of the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board, as well as other agencies with authority in this space, as well as legislative and executive activity. So I'm not a cannabis licensee. I have no stake in any cannabis businesses. I do have a computer science background and recognize that my independent perspective might be helpful in the traceability conversation I actually addressed the committee in 2018 after the first report. I've submitted written comments which go into much more depth than I'll present here today, and mainly wanted to provide some missing context I felt from the auditor's report. The Chair Postman just mentioned the stakeholder groups that were engaged and formalized by the agency to receive feedback. There were actually three different groups, or three different stakeholder work groups. I participated in all three. And I definitely recommend looking at what came to be called the Traceability 2.0 work group. And this was between September 2019 and March 2021, kind of well into the MJ Freeway phase when the entire regulated community was done with MJ Freeway. I recognized that that was a failed vendor and failed effort. and was working with the agency staff at that time to help them along to figure out, well, how do you get out of this rock and hard place situation that you're in? And there was a lot of conversation at the time about problems with the existing traceability platforms, really any centralized traceability platform, and difficulties that the regulated community encountered with that, costs and expenses, with this pretty strict, pretty extreme oversight. And so agency staff at that time put together the recommendations from that group, many of which you'll see in the state auditor's report as concerns that exist to this day. And so wanted to bring that to your attention because a lot of that work's already been done. A lot of those conversations have already been had, and it's already known. Now, to the point of leadership turnover and loss of institutional knowledge, that's very true and very real. And in my written comments, I point out that a lot of that happened around March 2021, when the recommendations of this group were finalized and the agency came forward and said, but we're still going to go with rebranding, redeveloping this contingency reporting system that we put together. And basically all that group's work was put aside. And we got CCRS out of the deal. And shortly thereafter, the other integrator work sessions were cut off, which are the primary customers who would be actually having to interface their software applications with CCRS. So they lost all of that feedback opportunity from the prime customers for their new system. So issues around data validation, et cetera, would have been caught at that early stage. So I did have some recommendations.
Yeah, let's do it quick because then we want to give Jim time before.
Yes, absolutely. So in conclusion, I did offer some recommendations that are in line with what the auditor's reports concluded. We're stuck with CCRS until 2031, right? And so the number one recommendation right now, the system operates by uploading files to a system, and folks maybe get an email back saying, okay, it actually came through. If there's an interest in doing real-time data, real-time analysis, that can't happen without an actual API interface to their system. It's not rocket science to actually implement that. Maybe it's difficult to do in state government. I can understand that. However, that has to happen if you're going to do anything. The second one is that after we got rid of central traceability systems, that was helping to do the exchange of data between licensees in a standard and normal form. After we went to CCRS, that wasn't there anymore. And so the industry actually had to come together and come up with that standard for data exchange, which is in place now and already exists. And LCB could be actually leveraging that by participating in that network, getting validated data about all the transactions that are happening within the industry. So use those data schemas that are already out there for not only transfers, but also lab testing results. And finally, one thing that's really kind of glossed in all of this, when the decision was made to move away from BioTrack and go with another vendor, the apparently successful bidder announced by the agency was Franwell Metric. But they didn't get the contract. And so I suggest looking back, investigating, well, what were the reasons why Metric was not actually awarded that contract? Because they're the only centralized traceability vendor left standing at this point. So why didn't they get the contract then? Are those reasons still valid now? Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. And then Jim, if you're online, why don't we have you go ahead?
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
We can see you and hear you, and yeah, let's
Well,
try it.
hopefully the
Let's go
seeing
for that
isn't
2
too
to
bad.
3 minute timeline if you can. Okay, thanks, Jim.
I will try. I also testified 6 years ago at the initial I-900 meeting on this. Chair Mullen, committee members, thank you for your time, and all the new LCB executives that weren't around at the time. I was very impressed with the initial audit. I was very impressed with the direction, recommendations of the state auditor's office to actually utilize the traceability data to make the enforcement efforts more efficient, more targeted, more effective. It's a great way to go forward. I was supportive of that at the time. And when I gave my testimony 6 years ago, I did mention that there should be some risk management planning in place, because there was a very real possibility that the LEAF system that was underway at the time would fall flat on its face. There were very strong indications of that. The LCB, of course, said that everything was okay and that it would deliver by the end of the year on the promised outlier assessment capability. That has not occurred. That has not occurred in the last 6 months. In reading the current auditor's assessment, it's a very good, feel-good document where one can blame others, one can blame staff turnover, none of which presumably was surprising. One knows when a retirement is coming often. A decent functioning organization would have transition plans in place, particularly when it is a key project oversight role of highly paid, highly compensated senior officials within the organization. I have seen a number of things in the record that appears to be gathered here by input from LCB staff, some of whom have been around for those years, many of whom have not. It is very inconsistent with my very direct experience with what has happened with this system over the last, when I say the system, seed to sale traceability, over the last 11 years. There's some things there that seem false. You know, they're problematic. I would like to make 3 points. One is that this agency has a very discrete and identifiable history of removing data resources and data capability when the information contained within those systems and the capabilities that making the data available give to external observers shed light on areas in which the agency could be doing their jobs, could be doing their jobs better. A classic case and example of that was the data dashboard that the LCB had in question, had in place for the first 3 years of the market, a portion of the first 3 years, which somehow or other disappeared in mid-2017 before BioTrack went away. It was fed largely from BioTrack. And I believe, you know, in timing, the reason that that system, I don't know if it's the reason, that system went away in a couple of months after a discussion started going on online that the data from the BioTrack system that was being displayed in the agency dashboard made very clear that with each unfolding month, the levels of production, wholesale production in the industry, far exceeded the levels that were being sold out of the industry in the regulated system, which of course began to suggest an environment in which a whole lot of product was being produced, which was not being sold within the regulated system. So from day one, traceability, seed to sale traceability has been put forward by the LCB, by the Attorney General, and by the federal government through the Cole memo as being an integral, not an optional, an integral component of having a well-regulated legal cannabis market. Being able to track the stuff, being able to reduce diversion, being able to do a decent job of tracking product through the system in case a product recall should become necessary. The LCB has really fallen flat on its face on all of those things. And I think, quite frankly, you should be somewhat put off by the fact that in 6 years, they have failed to deliver on a simple outlier assessment recommendation, which was very directively done by the state auditor's office. And to then blame that on vendors not doing their job, inadequate project management, and the turnover of executives. I have made...
Please wrap up, okay, Jim? Thanks a lot, if you can.
I will wrap up now, thank you. I do believe that you've been sold a bill of goods in the testimony that have been given by the agency to the auditor, and the reframing of this as it's other people's fault should not be accepted as is. The SMP linkage with traceability is new, at least this first I've heard of it. And it's, again, it's a deflection, because if you look at the SMP project, that has failed now at least twice, possibly 3 times. If you look at the LCB's main page for it this morning, it says that new updates will be coming in the first quarter of 2024. After $10 million of expenditures, they basically got a new public records portal and a couple of other things, one related to licensing and other, that are, in my opinion, steps backward from where they were before. This agency does not manage public funds well. They do not manage projects well. And if you just take a look at the OCIO dashboard today for the SMP project, I think you may see that there are some dangers of that even being done by 2031. It's certainly falling behind every time. With all due respect, I think you've basically been lied to today. I think you've been lied to by the LCB, and I think it's an ongoing thing. Some of their facts are correct, for sure. The way they are framing it is at best dishonest. And I do believe this state is at risk, if the feds really wanted to hold you to having a well-regulated market, of stepping on it pretty damn hard. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jim, for your comments. I appreciate that. And that concludes the first of our state auditor report.